Hi guys, ever since my majestic review of the ZV-E10 Mark II, people have been asking me about lens selection for that little beast of a camera. So that's what this video is going to be. And of course, these lenses can be used as well on the FX30 that you're looking at and the a6700. They do share the same sensor after all. And of course, we can't forget about little Dougie. These lenses will pair very nicely with the little ZV-E10, the original that got it all kicked off on this channel. So let's talk about it. Now, I will focus on some video lenses, but then I will talk about a couple of all-purpose photo lenses, including a telephoto towards the end. But let's start right away with the widest focal length that I will recommend, and it's this one right here. This is the little Sony 11mm f1.8. Look at how tiny this little lens is. Oh my goodness. So if you want to vlog, a lot of people are going to buy a ZV-E10 Mark II or, the a6700, the original ZV-E10 for vlogging purposes. They want to hold the camera out in front of their gorgeous faces and walk around talking their nonsense, and this lens will do a great job for you right here. It will work well with that active stabilization crop, which is 33% on the ZV-E10 Mark II, 44% on little Dougie, 12% on the a6700 and FX30. But either way, you are covered. Either way, you are covered. It lets in so much light at f1.8. So if you're going to vlog, this is definitely my #1 recommendation, as well as astrophotography. If you like doing little photos of the Milky Way and the stars and all that, this lens is very wide and very fast, will be great for that. But I will say that there is a budget alternative to the Sony 11mm. If that seems a little too rich for your blood, for about half the price, you can get the Yongnuo 11mm f1.8, and it's not far behind the Sony in terms of quality. This is a great budget option. Now, it's not going to work quite as well with that Sony active stabilization, which is one of the reasons I would definitely recommend the Sony 11 if you can swing the price. But this is a great lens with an aperture ring that can be clicked or declicked, a focus hole button, an on-off switch. They packed a lot into this lens, and optically it's almost as good as the Sony, so there is a budget alternative. But let's still talk now about the wide angle, but we'll say wide angle zooms. And in this category, you really have three options. You have the Sigma 10-18 f2.8, the Tamron 11-20 f2.8, and the Sony 10-20 f4. The Sony 10-20 f4 is a great small compact lens, but it is an f4, so you aren't going to get as much background separation and it's going to struggle in low light. But if you shoot at f4 or higher, let's say for things like landscape photography, you are going to love that Sony. Now, my personal favorite out of those three, and they are all outstanding lenses, don't get me wrong, I like the Sigma 10-18 f2.8. Lets in a nice bit of light at that 2.8. I have the versatility of the 10-18 zoom. You can even use that in a studio setting. So that would be my pick for wide angle zoom. Now let's move on to a focal length that I have to say is most important for me and what I do, and that is the angle that you are looking at right now. I like to use for my talking head videos about a 24mm focal length, full frame equivalent, and that is what you're going to get with this next lens selection. The one you're looking at right here is the Sony 15mm f1.4. I am sitting about 4 feet away from the camera, maybe 3.5 feet away from the camera, and it's giving me this shot right here. And this lens is outstanding. I love it. It might be the best aps-c lens you can buy for the Sony system. It is just such a sharp, fantastic lens, almost no focus breathing whatsoever. Plus, you have the focus breathing compensation in all of those new Sony cameras. Not that you need it with this guy. So this is my studio lens. I leave it on my FX30 and you get all of these lovely shots. But I don't know if it's my #1 recommendation. It's my #1 recommendation if the money is not a major factor for you. But if you are looking to save some money, the Sigma 16mm f1.4, I've called this the best value lens of all time for aps-c mirrorless cameras, and I still think that is the case. This 16mm f1.4 will get you this exact look with just the same image quality. It doesn't have as many bells and whistles. It has no aperture ring. It has no switch from manual focus to autofocus. It has no focus hole button, just a rubber focus ring, and it is a bit bigger and bulkier than the Sony 15, but in terms of image quality, fantastic. Barely any focus breathing on this thing. So a studio lens, this one right here, is such a great studio lens at an absolutely amazing cost. Now there is one more lens that has entered this category you may want to think about. Is the one I have right here on my ZV-E10. It is the Yongnuo 16mm f1.8. Now it's a 1.8 instead of a 1.4 that you will see on the Sigma and the Sony, so it's going to let in a little less light, not as good in low light situations, won't have as much of the background separation, but it is extremely affordable. So if you want this type of look for your aps-c camera and you don't have a ton of money to spend, then right here, the Yongnuo 16mm f1.8 is the way to go. But overall, out of the three lenses, then the Sigma 16mm is definitely the best value. The Sony 15mm is the best lens, but it does come at quite a cost. So overall, for locked off tripod shots in a studio, I'm going to have to recommend the Sigma 16mm f1.4 as the best lens you can get in terms of quality and price. Now, before we get into the all-purpose lens category, let's talk about one more specialized category for prime lenses, and that is portraiture. So if you want to take head and shoulder shots, portraits of people, you want to make them look good at a wedding so that they can feel superior to their friends, and then they'll hire you, their friends will, so that they can feel superior right back. Then right here, I recommend the Viltrox 75mm f1.2, a 1.2 on an aps-c camera C. And as you can see, it is not a small lens by any stretch of the imagination, but the pictures will absolutely blow you away. Now, it is not a standard focal length for portraits. Usually people like to shoot around 85mm full frame field equivalents, and this one is about a 112.5mm full frame equivalent, so you have to stand back a tiny bit further than you're used to with, say, a traditional 85 field of view on full frame. But the pictures are just wonderful coming out of this thing. Now, if you do want that more standard focal length of 85 for portraits and a much smaller, lighter lens that is a bit cheaper, actually, the Sigma 56mm f1.4, that can't be beat at that focal length. So if you want to take portraits, you want to save a little bit of money, a little bit of size, and still have great photos, don't have to stand far back as you do with this one, the Sigma 56 is the way to go. However, overall, for portrait photography, the Viltrox f1.2 75mm beauty is my pick. When it comes to an all-purpose lens, something you can just stick on your camera and never have to take it off, I think you have three options. You have the Sony 16-50 f2.8, the Sigma 18-50 f2.8, and the Tamron 17-70 f2.8. Now, the Sony 16-50 once again is overall probably the best lens in this group, but it is extremely expensive compared to the other two lenses. The Tamron 17-70 will give you the widest focal range, and it also has VC, vibration compensation, so it has lens stabilization. When it comes to taking photos and video with the ZV-E10 Mark II, which doesn't actually have an IBIS system, it would be nice to have that Tamron 17-70 f2.8. But be warned, with that Tamron, when you have IBIS like the a6700 and the FX30, sometimes that IBIS does seem to fight the Tamron's VC, and there's no real way to turn that off. So some people have trouble with that when they're using the IBIS in the camera with that lens. So hopefully that can be fixed in maybe a firmware update, but right now it would be an issue, and I would advise you maybe to stay away from the Tamron if you're using one of the camera bodies that does have IBIS. And so overall, even though the Sigma 18-50 f2.8 has the smallest focal range and doesn't have any lens stabilization, that is still my pick in this particular category. I love the way the photos and the videos come out of that lens. It is just so razor sharp, and it is so small and light. You can basically do macro photography with it. It has a great magnification ratio and is so small and discreet. You can just take it around wherever you are going, and that is why it is my personal favorite out of those three, but I don't begrudge anyone for having any of those three lenses because they're all absolutely wonderful. With a telephoto lens, you want to get some action that is far away. Maybe you're doing wildlife, bird photography, something like that. The 70-350 from Sony, that would be my pick in this category. Now, there are some alternatives like the Tamron 18-300, but personally, I would go with the Sony 70-350 for my telephoto needs. Now, of course, these are just my picks for what I do and the way I shoot. My general recommendations to you, if you are like me, and if you're like me, congratulations, I am a really terrific person. But if you have other suggestions of things that you like to use, just write them down below. Tell us what you like and why you like them, and we can have a nice little discussion about it. Everybody can learn from your knowledge. So thanks for watching this. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.